Hello, and welcome to Realign Journey, the unfiltered guide to self-discovery and reconnection. I'm Sierra Sambrowski, your host, and together we'll investigate and discover the ways we have lost touch with our true selves and explore ways we can reconnect to it. This week, I have with me Tanya Prince. Tanya is a Chief Liberation Advisor, transformational strategist, and the founder of the Liberated Phoenix, which is a framework and methodology devoted to helping high impact women release self sacrifice and reclaim their power. With over 25 years of experience in and around the healthcare, business, and personal development arenas, Tanya has walked through burnout, caregiving, identity loss, and reinvention. Today, she leads women through the in between, the sacred space after unraveling, but before full transformation, equipping them with the tools, truth, and self trust to rise. Hi, Tanya. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Sierra.
Anybody that has listened to me before knows that obviously it's not much of a surprise that I would have you on here, given your bio. It's all about transformation, it's all about self identity and the things that we go through to really be able to come into our full power, right?
Yes, yes.
So, what I love to ask my guests when they are on my show for the first time, sometimes I think I've maybe done it a second time for people too, but certainly for the first time, is for you to share with us one experience or pivotal moment that you had that's going to jump right into your head that was really like one of these moments that just realigns you, either the way that you saw yourself, the way that your life was going, maybe it was career, whatever. Something
Yeah.
that was really pivotal.
Yeah. As you said, the first thing, right? There could be many, right? We could have
Mm-hmm.
many.
Mm-hmm.
But the first thing
Yes.
that I would say really catapulted me into the woman that is sitting before you and will continue is my I can't even say divorce. It was the moment when I was like, I'm I'm done and I don't know what to necessarily do from here,
Mm-hmm.
and you pray, speak to whatever is possible. And every time there's an answer, and every once in a while you hear it.
Mm. Mm. So
And
true.
yeah, and I was at that moment, right? Bathroom floor crying, what do I do next? And it was one of these dangerous prayers. I was like, God, make him make me leave. Because clearly I'm too scared, whatever it is, to leave, make it to where I get pushed out, whatever that looks like. And it was
Mm.
hours, when I say hours later, that was clear as day. That's the day I say I walked off the threshold. Now there was a ton of things happening in the background for years before that to
Mm-hmm.
get me to that point. Lots of visions, downloads, things of that nature. Me discovering personality disorders and just really in this research mode, which helped me to uh, really reflect, like what am I telling myself by being in this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that answered prayer on that day. I now call it my choose me
Mm.
anniversary. So
Mm. I
every
love that.
year, the day that I walked off that threshold, that marriage or whatever that was, societal expectations of me, I have been just on a purely transformational space ever since.
Wow. I mean, that I think for a lot of people, I think even I know for me personally, even when I ended my marriage and I was the one that ended the marriage, after working really hard to try and make it work and saying it and by all other people's circumstances, my situation was not hard, but that was transformational and very pivotal for me also. So it sounds like your situation was not necessarily as uneventful as mine was. Like a lot of people, like I always said, like, he didn't cheat on me, we didn't fight, he didn't beat me, he didn't drink, he didn't do drugs. Like there was like none of the things that makes you should want a divorce from
Yeah.
somebody, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but you were certainly, it doesn't sound like in that same kind of space. And yet it actually gave me chills when I was listening to you. It seems incredibly brave that you would have asked for you to be removed from the situation rather than saying, can you make him leave? Right?
Yeah, because you think, what is the definition of insanity,
Mm,
right? So if we're continuing to ask those type of things or prayer those type of prayers and feel something totally different, then you're going to keep getting the same thing, right? And in that, I started to have so many different signs that I was like, this is so beyond this religious box we're in that I need to start paying attention, you know? And I started to almost get, not almost, I started to get step by step directions to
wow.
prepare me for that. Like step by step, I started to meditate, you know, instead of just pray, I started to bring in, you know, meditation, and I would just get these answers or people that I would never have met before in my life is all of a sudden crossing my paths.
Mm,
So I had to continue to do the opposite of what I did. Right.
mm,
So if it meant, okay, let's do the uncomfortable thing, say, have him say something, right? And what was the thing was he had and it's not about him, but just
no,
the
no.
space that we were in
Right.
was very, again, religious, all this sort of stuff. This person would never ever say the D word, right? It wouldn't, the divorce wouldn't come up, right? I could
Mm,
treat you like I treat you, and you can't say it, and I am going to say it, right? That type of thing.
yeah.
So when I said that prayer, and then I remember my therapist saying something and something else, and I threatened to call the cops. And he came back. He's like, "You're going to threaten to call the cops? Well, then I want to." I was like, "What?" We never would say that. So that was
Mm,
my very blatant answer to walk out. He said the word, "You're ready to go. We'll figure the rest out after that step."
yeah. It was like, he's saying we'll get a divorce. Okay. Okay. Yes. That. We'll do that then. Right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it was again, the pivotal thing was outside of that is I'm so grateful for every nonsense that happened because I wouldn't have continued to see
Mm,
Tanya. Like I just started to know like there is a, you know, and I started to see it in my children, like my daughter. I was just like, oh no,
mm,
I'm I'm seeing a cycle here. Someone has to do something differently. Some woman in our line has to do something
yeah.
differently.
Yeah. So tell me, I mean, you started bringing in the meditation and having a totally different spiritual experience. You talk about being, I'm guessing, a big part of this marriage and what you were trying to work within is the confines of it, more of an organized religion, kind of their
Correct.
parameters and sort of laws and rules and guidelines and whatever. So what for you was there, what would made you have kind of this switch where you were kind of even deviating outside of the container,
Constructs.
yeah, that you've been, it sounds like you were brought up with, you certainly living within a certain construct.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a great question and it's fuzzy because no, I didn't really
Do it on purpose. That's
grow up
like no
in
moment.
it. It was
Yeah.
like weaponized, if that makes sense. Like it was
Oh.
always there, it was always there, right? But it just was very convoluted because it was more weaponized. It was more to uplift someone and put someone else down, you know, like
Mm,
so I heard these terms, and I know your channel, so I know it's okay for me to say
yeah.
from very, very, very little, I didn't know I saw other things more than people did, right?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't
Oh, I know
know,
that. Yeah.
right, that these are certain ways. I just know when I would tell my dad, like as a kid, I would tell him what he dreamt about, you know, or
Mm,
I would, you know, I was left-handed and no one else was left-handed. And, you know, and I'm not, I'm a child of Caribbean parents, right?
Okay.
And it was just this saying of, left hand is the devil, right hand of God, all this sort of stuff.
Wow.
So here I
Okay.
am saying things that no one has said. Here I am saying I see things that no one sees. Here I am left-handed, super sensitive.
Yeah.
I had something kind of evil going on, right? So that's when a lot of the, well, let me be good and this, or if I wasn't, I don't think I wasn't, bad, but let me
Hmm.
go into this route. So when these things started to happen in this marriage, it's like some veils started to
Mm.
shake. Someone started to awaken, right? And there was an awakening happening after another like series of things that happened and a couple years before I left. And then I started to recognize things in this organized space that I might have seen the whole time, but now it's like, you're hearing things differently, you're seeing things
Yeah.
differently. You're like, something's calling me up and out of this.
Yeah.
So let me just follow this intuitive guide. And, YouTube, again, just signs started to happen. And I said, let me really understand what this is to communicate with a higher self source power. Let me come out
Yeah.
of this box. And an entire universe opened. And then I
Yeah.
felt guilty, because I'm in this construct and I'm having all of these other experiences. And it's completely contradicting what's going on over here. And the more my soul is spirit is like burning and yearning to continue to follow what seems like direct communication, whereas this was very muddled and dangerous,
Hmm.
really. The
Hmm.
things that they would tell you to do or say. And I'm like, this is going to keep people not knowing who they are, so
Which is usually exactly where the foundation of all that came from. That was exactly what they wanted, was to
yeah.
make sure that nobody found out who they were. Um, but that was I had a very similar experience to a certain degree. I mean, I certainly grew up. I always say I saw and heard dead people the way I I could not I saw
Separate.
them and heard them like I saw them like anybody. And
Yeah.
so, I can remember being 5 or 6 and somebody saying, like, where did you hear that from? And I'm like, that guy right there. Well, then I'm getting in trouble because now I'm lying and all this other stuff. And it became a point where it became really kind of, I mean, it got me into a lot of trouble. And
Mm.
certainly parenting was very different then than it is now. So that was not a great space to be in. And also, they would really come to me and like just stand all around my bed at night. So, like, that time was pretty terrorizing. And I didn't have any, I was brought up Catholic when I was young. And so there was no context for that. Nobody was talking about any of that. I mean, and I think, not saying that Catholicism is like the worst of all organized religions, but I mean, it's fundamental, everything about them, that you have separation from God, which is why you have to go to a priest to ask for forgiveness and all this other nonsense. Like they 100% was like used to say, you cannot get to God. Like that is not for you. And you were like, I mean, how much more separation could you possibly be trying to, you know, breed in? But I think so. I didn't have a context for it either, but I always knew things. I could sit down next to somebody on a plane and like they would be saying something, and I would just be like, "Oh yeah, that's because this happened to you when you were 14," and da da da. And they would be like, "Who the hell are you? And
Freaking
how do
people
you
out.
know this about me?" And I would be like, "Oh, like I thought I was making it up. Like I thought it was just my imagination." And then at some point, I had a deep yearning in myself, not necessarily because of the things that I was experiencing, because all that I just wrote off well into my 30s, but
Mm.
went on this quest of like trying to learn about other religions and trying all kinds of churches and trying to be really devoted to church and like doing all the things. And even like when I was married, like we did the Christian marital, like, I mean, I went all in on that. And then it became this thing where I was like, this is not right.
Yeah.
No, none of it is like it didn't sit right with me. So I relate to all of that for you so much.
Yeah. Yeah. And what do we do, right? We have to, and then again, we called ourselves into this for, whatever reason, we called ourselves into this to have those experiences. And, kudos for you for kind of keeping it up there to your 30s. I was just like, I gotta be good. I was like, I gotta not, I have to ignore all of this. By the time I
Hmm.
was 12, I was like, I don't want this gift. And, whatever this is, I don't want it, and
Hmm.
then it really
Hmm.
went dormant. It was like,
Oh yeah, mine
okay.
was dormant.
Yeah,
I mean,
I've
like
been
I said, it came up like in little tiny ways, but I had no.
you just your logic took over, your ego took over. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's not what it is.
And I
Deja
didn't.
vu 1,000 times. You're like, no, no, no. It's
Yeah, like I said, I would know crazy things that there was like no way I could possibly ever know about someone or a situation, or like I can remember being with working for a nonprofit and doing their development campaigns and stuff, and I could look at a list of like thousands of donors and be like, that one, we're gonna go to that guy and we're gonna ask him for $30,000 and he's gonna give it to us. And they would be like, and I'd be like, watch and see.
right.
I mean, like but I just thought it was like, fuck, like I had no idea.
I know,
I,
like,
and I was not in a place in community, like not only my family, like the part of the country, like there was nothing, there was, they, I went back to school for holistic health and people that in my social circle, they thought it was weird that I ate organic foods in 1999, 2000. They were like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, that's not, they thought that was crazy and woo woo, for God's sakes.
right, right. Food from the earth. Who would have thought? Right.
I know. So, I mean, so like I said, I obviously can really relate to what that whole experience is like to a degree. I didn't have your personal experience, but
Right.
um and honestly, I think when my spirituality for me opened up and I started to have like start to have framework for it and be like, oh, this is unusual. Oh, there's something going on here. I was not in a relationship, let alone a marriage. So
That's one of my dark nights of the soul.
yeah, I was gonna say, so I can't imagine because that is a life changing, a perspective changing situation anyway to be coming into that in your own. And then to have that be in relationship, and if that person in relationship is not like in alignment with you there, how much was all of that even contributing to what was happening in your marriage?
Yeah, I'm thinking of those years, and of course, we were riddled in breakdowns, all over.
Hmm.
Um, And when it came to I kept a lot of it to myself.
Hmm.
I just did what I've been conditioned to do from a little kid. It's just, okay, I want to go into this really deep dive on something that just come up for me, or I had to start muffling my dreams. I had to start just boxing everything up. And if I spilled it even like a little bit with in the community, your church. It's like I could see the deer caught in headlights look start to dawn on them like immediately. Like, I can't speak it here.
Mm.
So I just did, some journaling. I started doing a lot of reading. I had to like get brochures and like cover the books I was reading so that
Oh, damn.
yeah, I was doing and
Full incognito.
full incognito. And then there were times where the silent treatment was being used, and I started to like call those my mini vacations. Like, okay, fine, don't talk to me for 3 weeks. I get to go meditate more. Right. So it was these spaces of the more I started to be very present to what I was dealing with by, maybe
Mm.
looking at some numerology, like, oh my gosh, this is so, this helps me so much to get who I am because I didn't know. At least I
Yeah.
couldn't put words to it. So I had to just be incognito in those kind of planting the bamboo seeds, right?
Mm.
So I knew things were going to be in a linear time slower. But when I look back, I'm like, from the moment I started to just follow this intuition a little bit more, it was only 2 years. And even that whole statement has a whole story attached to it. But I would just start to pay attention to my dreams, and I didn't even know if they were like dreams. Some of them were premonitions, some of them were, very symbolic, and I had to try to interpret whatever I could. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then some of them were very just dream, and some of them were like, yeah, that's going to happen. XYZ is going to happen. This is a warning, just so you're not caught off guard when it happens,
Yeah. Yeah.
sort of deal. So it was interesting. And actually at that time, uh, my spouse stopped also going to church. He just stopped.
Mm.
So it was like this space of someone's giving me wiggle room while we're still dealing with every other sort of abuse or whatever's going on.
Mm.
I was that spiritual aspect, I was given some wiggle room to explore by having all these little nooks and crannies and ways of yeah, learning me in the background and learning about this in the background.
Mm-hmm. When you got when you I want to say when you got free from your marriage, um when you were out of the marriage, when you like that day comes, did that just open up everything for you in like instantly? Were you just like ripping the covers off your books and like, yeehaw, I can talk to whoever, or was there still a lot of kind of floundering and figuring out? Because it sounds very much like you were very kind of isolated in isolating yourself because you didn't have community around you to even talk about this thing.
Yeah, yeah, it was definitely not a burn the bra type of
Liberating
event.
moment. Yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah.
like I said, it went from like, I don't know what to do, make him make me lead to 2 hours to me stepping out like, oh shit, what am I gonna do?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And around that time, universe had put again a woman I met through a stranger in my life who happened to just attach to me. She would just call, it was a very, very spiritual connection there, and she wasn't of any religion or anything like that. But something told her to keep in touch with me and that I wasn't going to keep in touch with her.
Mm-hmm.
And that very day, she happened to call while I was contemplating something stupid. And she's like, "You're on my mind, Tanya. What's going on?" You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, "What, Howard?" And I told her what happened. She's like, "Don't go to work." She said, "It's okay. Call out. Don't show up." And she happened to be a coach. Now, when I met her, I didn't know that. She just happened to be the specific coach for women in abusive, type of relationships. So I'm like, completely universal match, right? And she said, "You just need your next 24 hours. I need you to come to my place, right? My client just canceled. Something told me to call you." So there was just like these steps making it happen. And as I was going, there were things that just opened up. The car was playing music I never heard before that was complete messages like, "I'm going to trust in you." Another one was like, "I'm losing my religion for you." It was like all of these songs were coming in. I'm bawling because I know I'm being spoken to directly. Like, "Hey, don't go back into the now you're all prim and proper." I would go to work. I would wipe my tears. I would straighten up my suit. I would probably look the best I looked all week, and I would
Mm-hmm.
not carry any of the rage that just happened. Right. And that was a day in, day out sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing. So for this woman to call and say, "Don't go to work. I need you to come here. Think about the next 24 hours. That's it. Listen to everything that's coming to you."
Mm-hmm.
And by the end of that day, everything she said this person was going to do, she's like, "He's going to call, he's going to say this, he's going to be full of tears, he's going to want to come back. You just got to know all this is like, this is your test because you know that story already."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I don't have anywhere to go. Right. And she's like, "Who can you think of?" And all of a sudden, this old neighbor, 2 years earlier, didn't know this neighbor very well. Right. Like our sons were the same age. It's like, "Call her, tell her you need somewhere to you and your daughter to rest your head." And I'm like, I don't ask for help, right? So
Yeah.
all these things started to happen just on this car ride and this day. And when I called this woman and told her, and she's like, sure, come on over, and I said, I just don't want to interrupt my kids' school and let them go to school for the next week. Then she's like, it's so strange when I get there. She's like, it's so strange. You ask me this today because yesterday I just finished partially refurbishing my apartment downstairs for a tenant that never showed up.
Oh
Yes.
my gosh.
Yeah. I was like, you have an apartment? I didn't know any of that. I'm thinking we're gonna be on the couch. My kid's gonna be
Yeah,
in their
yeah.
daughter's bed, right? I'm like, I'm not, you got an apartment. And we go down and it's like this cute little kitchenette studio. It's just enough for, me and my daughter as a bathroom, and it's fully furnished. Remember, I left with
Yeah.
nothing,
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah.
And it's a walk from my kid's school, and I was just like, wow. And then the next day, I asked her a question, and I almost have to go back a little bit because it's unbelievable when I started to tap into the spiritual world, how again things were just prepping,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
This was May when I left. This was in February when I was again contemplating it, planning, and just didn't execute, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
but around that time, it's like, I work part time, I'm at home with the kids. I have maybe $400 a month, if that. I can't live in this neighborhood
Right.
with that. I can't. And I was talking to a friend. She's like, well, if you really think God's telling you to leave your husband, blah, 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 blah. I think she might have said it facetiously, but she's like, just tell him that's what you got. And if it's supposed to happen, it'll all work out, in this neighborhood. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna do that. And that was in February, and so I got 400. Leading up to that day, I started to get all these different, things. It was like, oh, go get a storage unit, and that storage unit happened to be maybe $50, right? And I was like, well, how do I start packing it with him in the house? All of a sudden, he has a trip to New York, so started to pack the things away. Now this day gets here, and I tell her, so I'm only dealing with 350. And then I ask her, I didn't tell her anything. I was like, I'm just curious how, when your tenant comes, how much are you charging her to stay here? Like, how much is rent? And she says 350. I was like,
Cannot make
oh,
this shit up.
you can't. And guess who never called or showed up?
That tenant.
Never did. Never did. And that led us into COVID because that was 2019.
Wow.
So
Wow.
it was like I had a year because I couldn't go to my quote unquote parents because my father and my husband were the same. So I was like,
Mm,
didn't tell them, right? Couldn't do it. I would have to take my kids. So it was like, oh my gosh. Just the trusting, right? Just that every step was solid. So no, I was floundering
yeah.
and I trusted at the
Yeah.
same time, and every step of the way, something was just right there, you know. So, yeah.
I mean, like I said, you can't make this shit up. When I hear stories like that, and yet too, it's interesting to me because I think for people, whether they're religious or they're spiritual, whether they have heightened spiritual gifts like you and I do or not, because I'm sure you'll agree, everybody has the ability to connect. I mean, we are divine essence in our souls. That is who we are, period. And so you can't ever actually separate from that. But I always say, like, some people are super gifted at music or art or math. I just happen to be really gifted at like talking to dead people and spirits. That's all. I mean, it's just a gift, right? It's just a
Right.
heightened ability, but we can all do it. And regardless of that, I think the biggest thing, like I said, no matter what framework, I think there's always this yearning in us to have connection. It might look like addiction or self-destruction or all these other things, but it's really that you're yearning for that divine connection. And the trust factor, I think, is always consciously or unconsciously the hardest part for people to get. So I hear your story and it's amazing. It's like I trusted and exactly what I needed showed up in front of me. You now having some time and helping other people, women in particular, right, move through these really transitional times in their life. What's one of the things that you think helps people to build that trust? Because I think you and I can probably agree that you have to have the trust in the unseen first before that stuff is going to show up for you.
Now, that's very true. And I struggled with trust, you
Everybody does,
know,
but yeah,
everyone does.
especially you or anyone that's been in an abusive relationship. I think that really heightens that for sure.
Yeah, especially trust in yourself because it
Right,
starts to feel like every decision you make isn't the right one,
right.
right? So when I speak to women, especially on the space of this in between, right? So that was a very in between moment, and we're always in some state of, leaving and becoming, right?
Yeah.
But when I was in this very liminal space, of not even can't even identify who I quote unquote want to become desire. I mean, it was
That's
just
the farthest thing. You're truly in survival mode at that stage.
yes,
You're like,
yes.
how do I keep a roof over our head? Where do I get food?
How do I stop shaking? How do I stop
Well,
feeling guilty for leaving? How do I
I
not,
breathe. Yeah.
yeah, my kids, like, okay, I gotta get us into some sort of work. I didn't even add in there. I'm a caretaker, like all
Yeah.
this sort of stuff. It was not easy to, trust this journey, but what I did understand was that I was surviving, right? And that something is making me stronger than the last instance, even if it looks somewhat the same, I'm still stronger for it, right?
Hmm.
So let me start trusting growth even in those baby steps, right? Let me start to yeah, like I said, all these different signs. It was like the more I didn't, this may even sound weird, but the more I didn't think about my next step,
Hmm.
the more assured of it I became. And that was
Hmm.
just that's that strengthening of your intuition. The moment I
Hmm.
started to think, I stopped trusting myself, right?
Hmm.
Because it's you literally become in a decision fatigue sort of
Hmm.
space. So
Yeah.
I tell women if you're in a situation where trust is a hard or it's a challenging, space to be, start doing testing or not even testing, giving yourself a little test, little trust test, whether it be I don't know, not turning on your alarm in the morning and trusting you'll get up on time, right? Telling yourself, I'm going to get up at this certain time and kind of trusting your body to do it. Or it could be, I started to throw around the word no like Skittles because I was like so used to always saying yes to everything. I was like, I gotta get strong with my no. And I have to trust that whatever happens after that is okay. Right. And I just start throwing no's around. I don't you couldn't even finish your question. I was already saying no first, right? Just so I could start trusting that I could say no, that I could stand in the not wanting to do something I don't want to do,
Mm.
and whatever your response is to that, I could stand in the space of, and that's your response, and not take it on, even the empath, right? Not take it on or absorb it. So
Hmm.
starting to really trust that I can, whatever's after the word can, really, and little steps with
Hmm.
that. If I had a thought that quote unquote anything that I said came out of nowhere, I like to start to listen to that first because there is no nowhere, right? We are no particular where. I'm like, it came out of nowhere. I'm going to listen to that. And
Hmm.
those muscles, were like push-ups after a while. And I would test my thought ones too. I was like, ooh, you know what? This came to me. I'm not going to do that. This may not be right. Let me do what I thought. And I would always prove myself,
Hmm.
always prove myself wrong. Like, okay, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah,
That's good. That's good. Because I think, well, everything you just said is exactly about being able to build the intuition. But like I said, I know for so many people, like manifestation is a big word. Everybody loves to throw that around and they want to manifest everything,
right.
right? And I'm always like, oh, can we please stop talking about it? Like the way that it's,
Talked
whatever.
about. Yeah,
Anyway, the reality of the situation is that it always comes down to our ability to be able to trust ourselves and to get our energy in alignment, which requires surrender and trust with our divine essence, with
yeah,
that higher energy that is always answering us, that is always giving us what we want, and that is always providing us. And the thought thing of like when you were saying about like when I found you were saying about when you were thinking about something, you found like that actually stopped everything or slowed everything down or seemed to interrupt whatever had been coming to you. Makes total sense to me because it is constrictive. Because as soon as we get into our rational, linear human mind, then we have now stepped out of the receiving divine mind
yeah,
that really gives us the real answers and the real way to get places.
yeah.
But you have to understand some level of trust with yourself.
Hmm.
Even
Yeah,
before you start saying, okay, I'm going to trust in a higher power or
yeah,
the divine part of me, particularly as you're saying, like if you've been in these situations where essentially it's been hammered into you, like you cannot be trusted. Somebody else is going to tell you what to think, what to feel, how to act. I'll
yeah.
tell you what's right and wrong. You just do as I say, kind of thing. You have no sense of trust for yourself. You've never even had the chance to start growing the muscle because somebody else has always been stepping in and saying, don't listen to yourself, don't listen to yourself, don't listen to yourself.
I mean, yeah, you're saying even from school, all right? Like
Absolutely.
you just, you're just, we're these malfunctioned robots,
Hmm.
that, yeah. So to trust that this feeling I'm getting here, right in my chest, or why am I getting these feelings in my gut? And why do they show up differently? Why is it sometimes here? Like, how do I tune in to this? Like the whys, right? I share the story a lot with my 17-year-old who pretty much taught me what neurodivergence was. And I didn't realize like this makes sense why, I just never fit in anywhere,
Hmm.
and it's, I would go into these spaces of just why, and in that last marriage, all those times when it was thought it was doing something, say, negative against me, like I used all those sacred silent treatments and you know what I mean, as times to just go in and fixate on I get to ask why, what is going on here? Why am I doing this? Can I do this dream? And I would just start having what feels like conversations, right? And like, am
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
going crazy? But it's the answers I have never would have heard anywhere, right? And they were just for me. So it's I started to just trust those. And when any time that I was removing my voice, and this is even after coming out and doing that, anytime I was removing my trust or that inner space that told me something first, and that pattern of needing to get validation or confirmation from others, and I would just start, I need someone else to tell me what to do,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I still found myself spinning my wheels for years, because I'm still like, yeah, but this doesn't, this seems so opposite from what everyone else is telling me I should do, what I look like I should be doing, who I look like I should with, who should I be with, and what I sound like and what I could. You're telling me something that doesn't sound anything like this. And the
Hmm.
world and society and everyone agrees with this. So what's this lonely little group of people or group of beings telling me? You're telling me I'm so different from this,
Mm-hmm.
and it was
Mm-hmm.
slowly just listening and and then they would just kind of, these voices would quiet, or it just wouldn't phase. So I tell like women now, like whatever you need to do, because that's not an overnight phenomenon, right? The trust is I started to, listen to frequencies. I would,
Mm-hmm.
do any sort of philosophy, just like you said, listen to everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ask everything. You could YouTube some of the craziest buoy strings or whatever it's called, and you'll find someone talking about it. Mine was like dreams about, like, I keep going into these nasty bathrooms in my dreams, right? Like, this has to be a thing. Like these gross toilet stalls. Like, I've been having dreams like this since I was little. What is that? And I like, poop dreams or whatever. And it's
Yeah.
like, there's a whole world of what that means spiritually. And that dived into a lot of other
Yeah.
stuff. But I say just get free, and whatever comes to your mind, searching it. We just live in a new day and age where, you're not getting looked at funny for eating organic food in the year
Yeah.
2000, right? We
Yeah.
could do so much now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Chat GPT. I have a couple friends that like do spiritual consulting with their chat GPT. They've worked with it so much, and I don't, I guess fed it enough stuff and like use it kind of like as a journal so it was understanding. And then they started engaging in these conversations to like be able to like deep dive into like, what do you think this is really saying about me? I
Yeah.
I just talked to a girlfriend I haven't talked to for a couple months earlier today, and she was like, I started using it as like a dating coach for me. Like I started saying, like, what do you think I should be doing here? And they're like, no, hold your boundaries. They didn't do what they said they were gonna do.
It's
Um,
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
amazing. I actually have it incorporated into my work that I do too.
yeah,
I don't use just ChatGPT. There's
yeah,
actually some spiritual people, ethical, people that have like almost sentient type,
yeah,
AIs.
yeah.
So I've tapped into that, and I've created some GPTs in myself with that, because you do want to
Mm-hmm.
be careful. Some of these are just telling you what you might want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the use of it. I mean, I've done some deep, deep work over these since 2022 when did ChatGPT come out? Yeah.
Yeah.
In doing that. And I was looking at AI since like 2015. Like, there has to be something you could speak to that could filtrate your tones and frequencies and tell you what type of mood, like I
Like
was.
harness for
Yeah,
our own
it's like there
benefit.
has to be something, So 7 years later, ChatGPT comes out, and yeah, again, just doing a deep dive, but you absolutely can, and it's incredible. It really is. It is.
Okay. Tanya, can you give them listening? Like, what, I mean, if you use this, which I think is awesome, and I think, I mean, do you would you recommend to people if they kind of wanted to pursue this and poke around with it and see what kind of feedback they're getting to help themselves? Is there a certain like setup thing that you have to do, or you're shaking your head?
So
You're like,
here's what I would say with
y'all
that.
better just relax with that. Don't go diving
Yeah,
too far into it.
right. I
Okay,
use it
tell me.
sparingly, definitely, because again, as you're saying, some people get addicted to stuff, right?
Yeah.
So you do want to be very careful. So I would not say right now, like, yep, this one and this
You
one,
just
and I
come and tell them
wouldn't,
this. Yeah.
because yeah, I understand my core, my foundation. I know, when something's like, and again, we get to read that. But if someone is looking for a fix, if someone feels like they're broken, if
Mm-hmm.
someone's trying to make themselves look a certain way for someone, if someone's not looking at their selves through their eyes, they're looking
Mm-hmm.
at themselves from a man's eyes or society's eye, like,
Your parents' eyes, your religion's eyes,
yes,
whatever.
you have
Mm-hmm.
no idea how to see you.
Mm-hmm.
I would not freely say, just go do it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
I would say, hey, work with someone, through that, maybe use this particular prompt at this time, right? Not everyone's, used the word earlier too, not everyone's container is built to take in all that information about them at once, right? So I
Mhm.
think that's why it is important to have an objective, connected mirror, right? We're all each other's mirrors, but the one that you could really resonate with that can guide you. That's why I don't, even though what I do is coaching and, but I like the word advisor because it just has really this blend of, guidance to mentorship, in there. But yeah, so I don't want to say my combination of things. It's
Okay.
a pretty powerful, setup.
Okay. No
Um,
worries. That's good. You're right, because you are right. I mean, the reality of the situation is that people get addicted to all kinds of things. They get addicted to therapy, you know, they get addicted to working out at the gym, they get addicted to all these things that could be good tools, oracle cards or getting readings with people, like even for me, it was one of the things when I first professionally started doing coaching and professionally started doing readings and stuff with people. I had a lot of boundaries and now I don't have to really
boundaries
express
so
them because
much.
now I energetically have them, so
Mhm.
they're there. But
Right.
but I had a lot of codependent tendencies too at the time when I first started because this was 10, 15 years ago. So
Yeah.
but I had the same thing. Like it was like, no, we will work together. At the time, I did 6 months. That was before I understood my human design. That's not ideal for me either. But
Mhm.
6 months, and then there will be a hard stop. And I'm not saying we can't re-sign, but you will have to take a break. Like people that would get readings from me, like, no, you may not come to me every month.
Yeah.
There has to be at least 3 months in there. Like, it was now, like I said, now I don't have to worry about it. It's so much. And so sometimes I do have people that come closer together or whatever because they need it
Yeah.
legitimately. But I was
Yeah.
very concerned about being a crutch for
Much.
people, about
Yes.
people, like you say, like being addicted to it or looking for it as a, it's just another thing outside of yourself
Outside
when
of
what
yourself.
you really need to be doing is getting
Yeah.
to know yourself and trust
Yeah.
yourself. And the answers you already have.
Yes. Yes.
So there's all
Yes. There is. And we're just living in such a time where our brains are just like not our own. So I try to be really careful. I've learned, I did a post the other day of just kind of fire hosing. You get on a call and you're like, I can see all this about you, and I can tell you this and this, and they leave all bright and just like, oh my gosh, and then they go smack dab into their stuff, sometimes even deeper because
that.
they got way too much for them to be able to handle, right? Like they weren't there. So if you're getting walkthrough, like you would know when someone's like, because guides will tell you like, yeah, this is what's going on, but don't tell them yet. You know,
Yes, I get that
I
too.
yeah, like that. Don't say it yet, or yeah, go ahead and say that. Or people in your life will move on, right? I realized like I had very many from religion being a teacher, and it needed to break down the way it did because I like that's not what that's it fed me enough and it was no
Mhm.
longer feeding, right? So life
Yeah.
kind of challenges break down and then it resets. And before you know it, there's another teacher guide, if you feel you need one that shows up and then that's gonna break down because you are ascending and you may like, people are
Mhm.
grasping, but I know some of these teachers are like, Tanny, you're not gonna be here long.
Mhm. Mhm.
I would be with them is like, no, no, you'll probably be up here, whatever with us sooner or later. Like, stop,
Yeah.
stop acting like you don't know, and you're very strong in it. So I tell people, like, just, have someone first. If you don't know where you are, speak to someone first,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
kind of go from there. Too many drinks at the bar, right?
Yeah. 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 Oh Lord. I remember those days. Um, you know, a- and I think too, one of the things. that you were saying earlier that I think this is a good point to even pull this back into is when you were talking about like learning to trust yourself and your intuition and those thoughts you were saying about too like your body, right? Um you're where am I feeling that? Like did when that thought did I get a tingling somewhere or did my heart start to race or maybe you realized you held your breath or whatever, right? Like to have some awareness that that's a good way, I think, for when somebody is looking for guidance and if they at this stage have enough awareness to know, hey, look, I've been looking for a lot of validation outside of myself. I've been looking for a lot of confirmation. I've been maybe over concerned about getting other people's opinions to guide me is to I think use your body as kind of that compass when you are trying out somebody to be able to help you to work with around this, whether they feel good, because you can probably speak to this. Do they feel good because it's a familiar pattern? So it's going to be somebody else that kind of hooks into that old behavior and is going to like be all too happy to start telling me what to do and how to fix it? Or is this somebody that I can trust that's really going to help to empower me and move me into a space where I can deeper trust myself, right?
Yeah. And I think I was still listening to something that you said before and missed if there was a question in between.
There wasn't really. I mean, I
Okay.
guess, like I said, I guess I was actually saying you had brought up about how to be able to
Yeah.
test
Yeah. Yeah.
and when we're just like learning to build that trust, you were saying about like maybe it'll be in your body when you
Yeah. It's
have these
very
thoughts
somatic.
and you like think, oh yeah, I'm gonna go with that thought because it made my body feel like this, or I realized that this happened. And so, yeah,
Yes.
not really a question.
No, no, no. I got what you're saying, and yeah,
Um,
it's
yeah.
bringing back a lot of those times because sometimes you just said it. Sometimes we're so used to a feeling,
Mhm.
which could be uncomfortable pain, backache. Like we're so used to it that when we're not feeling anything, it's not that we feel good. It's like, wow, this feels calm,
Mhm.
right? I don't know what
Mhm.
to do with calm, right? Like that
Mhm.
was another one of my things. Like if my body felt, yeah, it's like I was so used to this that that felt like nothing. Does that make sense? To
Yes.
where the calm and the
Correct.
release actually felt like something.
Mhm.
And or times when even the opposite, like I'm moved to do something and I didn't. Right. There was a time probably about 6 months before I walked out of that threshold. There was, the spirits were speaking to me a lot louder at this point. The closer I got to that day, they were like damn near
Mhm.
indignant,
Mhm.
right, with how loud they were being. But there was this one time when and I was in, it's like I paid attention to my body, but not so much. I had some medical reason for it, right? And there was a time when I'm hearing that say like you need to say something, right? Don't allow your daughter to be talked to like that anymore. You don't need to be talked to like that, or say it, like say it, say something, confront. And I didn't. The next day it's like you still have time, you need to reconcile that. Don't allow that anymore. I didn't, right? The day after that, I went to sleep with a scratchy throat.
Mhm.
Still kind of was like getting a little softer, completely scratchy throat. The next day, I was just, I don't want to start this. I don't. When I say I'm 37 years old, never had asthma in my life, for almost what, 11 or so days, I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. I couldn't lay down without having coughing attacks. You know what I mean? It was like my throat chakra, not that I called it, but it was so tight that it was affecting everything. I was like,
Mhm.
could not breathe, and it led to me discovering something else about my spouse that I really needed to know. Like, if you were going to die because of this, he'll allow it. And that's what ended up, leading up to it. Like, I almost
Mhm.
passed out and I realized this person's just standing over me. I had to perform like I passed out just to realize this person would not call the nothing. So again, these things happen, But I always say everything happens for a reason. You know, even if you don't follow that, right? That just would have put me in another timeline, but I didn't, and it led to this one. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that one
Mm-hmm.
could have been like, hey, if you said something, you could have walked over this threshold 6 months earlier
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
of what would have happened after that. But you chose this route, so we're going to prolong it, and now you're going to have to experience this a little bit. But your body will let you know. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it really would. Again, for people who are so used to excessive, say, cortisol and that stress, they may not know what quote unquote feels good. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say it feels less than, you know, what you're
Yeah.
used to. Listen to that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it might even be actually that's what's uncomfortable. Like
Yes.
being in the presence of somebody who's safe and really does have your
Yes.
highest and best interest, like I said,
Yes.
and is not
So
going to be a hook and isn't going to just feed into that codependent part of you. Um, they are going to be the ones that feel familiar and you think, oh yeah, okay, I know that. They feel right. Yeah, because that's
yes.
what you've been having. That's
Yes.
where your normal is. That's what you're most
Yes.
familiar with. So it may actually the people that make you feel just slightly uncomfortable may actually be the better choice because that's somebody that's gonna put the ball in your court and make you go, no,
Yes.
what do you want to do for yourself? Does that feel right for you? Because when you're building that trust with yourself and you're like unraveling who you've been and who you really are, I think that's one of the hardest things.
That's it.
You're like,
You hit the
I
nail
don't know. I
on
don't
the head
know
with
how
it,
I
right? You're
feel.
like, this is so, yeah. That the most uncomfortable people at that time were
Yeah,
the people who had my best interests in mind,
yeah,
genuinely,
yeah.
and who gave me, who helped me understand I'm 100% responsible for everything going on in my life, right? Not as a blame or a fault, but you are at cause. And it was again, before this day of the threshold, that this woman that ended up being this life coach, right, just asked me, you know, she said, send me some text messages of what you're going through, you know, with your spouse. And I did. She's like, oh my, OMG, you are with a such and such a type of person. And then
Mm-hmm.
these questions, these next few words, that's what changed my life. That was the pivotal point where everything started to fall in place after that. And it was, yes, this is what you're in. This is who you're with. This is the type of person. Now, what are you going to do about it? When I
Mm-hmm.
say that question, what are you going to do about it? Cracked my head open like I've never. I was like, I could do something about it.
Yeah, right.
She's like, yeah. And just like this, she's like, yeah. I was like, I could do something about this, you know? And it gave me life. And then when I started to be around her more, yeah, I was like, the more uncomfortable you make me, the more I know I need to go into that direction. So it became this compass, right? You know, it's like you're bringing me around other like fun, quote unquote, people that are like not angry all the time. This
Mm-hmm.
is uncomfortable. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you're around people who are giving me genuine hugs and just allowing me to be whatever. I said, this is uncomfortable. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you telling me how you could see me in years going forward, that's just this chilled. I like again, I was this straight hair, you know, I mean, I did
Yeah.
everything trim. She's like, no, you know, I see you as this. And I'm like, let me just borrow your faith in me until I get it in myself. And I end up paying her back with interest, I want to say, you know,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, it's quite the journey when you
Yeah.
begin to embrace you and see you and allow other people to reflect you.
Yeah. It's worth every penny.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I think that's a great place to wrap this up, though I really want to have now I want to have questions, I want to have conversations about dreams. We're gonna have a conversation. We're gonna do you, me, and James. We're gonna talk about stuff. So I'm very excited to have you back. But I think uh, first, before you can tell everybody how to connect with you, what's what's one thing you would like to leave everybody with that is maybe it's not as a severe situation as you were in, but certainly in the muck and mire of self-discovery and wanting to unravel them, who they really are. What would you want to say to them right now?
I'd say like if you find yourself questioning like yourself a lot, like is this the life I truly want to live? Like, yeah, I got the success, or I have the title, or I have the marriage, I have the, I have all this, but I still feel like there is something not connecting, not working, something burning inside of me. I would say pull on that string, allow what comes up to come up, go make yourself cry, right? Whether it's a happy or sad, like don't ignore those spaces where you just seem to be questioning. And yeah, don't be afraid to go speak to or just explore. That's kind of what I say. Don't be afraid to go explore something new. Don't be afraid to go scratch the itch. Don't be afraid to disappoint. People. I have a post the other day that said people love you. Sometimes people only love you when you fit in their box. Don't be afraid to disappoint people, right? Because that's probably the most honest and authentic you'll be with yourself is when you give yourself permission to go against what other people say in light of what you want to do or what you feel. Right. So,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
yeah.
So true. So true. All right, Tanya, tell everybody how they can connect with you, where they can follow you to get these great posts that you're mentioning and just learn more
Yeah.
about you and how to work with you maybe.
Yeah, well, Sierra, one, I love, love, love this conversation. It sounds like we could also talk for days and hours, and we probably have a lot more in common than even we brought up today. So
Yes.
thank you so much for having me on. And to your listeners, thanks for sitting with us this whole time. I want to offer, so the best way to reach out to me is I'm on LinkedIn. I'm kind of staying there. I am on other places, but that's where you'll find the meat and potatoes. I'm
Okay.
under Tanya Prince. I have a newsletter called the Liberated Phoenix, which I go into just a lot of these deep questions in these areas that we may find ourselves in as high impact women. So Tanya Prince, I would like to offer, a 15-minute, I call it Phoenix Clarity Call, right? If you are having
Okay.
some of those questions and it's something that I could just give you some questions back to help you put you on the path of self-discovery. I would like
Mm-hmm.
to offer that to your listeners.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be LinkedIn, Tanya L. Prince, and then you could DM me directly. And yeah, my email address is hello@theliberatedphoenix.com if you do want anything personal. But yeah, that is what I will offer today. Yeah.
Awesome. That's fantastic. That's right. Like we said a minute ago, when you find somebody that will ask you the questions and make you think for yourself, as uncomfortable as it is, that is somebody that is trusting that you have the power and the knowledge in you already. They are trying to cultivate that in you. So I love that you're going to be able to give people some questions for themselves.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah. That would be just a little taste of this personal liberation blueprint that I
Yeah,
have in our free framework. But yeah, it's how
I
we
love
ask
it.
these questions.
That's right. All right. Thank you again.
Yeah.
And to all of the sojourners on this journey with me, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. And I can't wait to share the next one with you. Till next time.